Toolbox Talks. I write Toolbox Talks at Eagle all the time.
She's given a class, so I just have to.
I write Toolbox Talks all the time. This most recent Toolbox Talk I wrote probably 2 weeks ago, and it's about voluntary use of an N95 dust mask that people use all the time. So Katie and I thought this might be an appropriate one to go over with you, and I'm just going to conduct it, and then you guys can go on your merry little way. Toolbox Talks are not very difficult. Usually they have some kind of written spiel at the top, and you're trying to relate it to the jobs that you're on or have some kind of relationship to what you're doing. Then you print your name and you sign your name, and this information gets saved. In the event OSHA shows up at some point, and you have to prove that you guys have been doing regular and ongoing training, this is the information that Katie or whomever would pull out to say, we are doing it. We are making an honest to good effort to do it. In a perfect world, at some point, the goal is that you guys are going to end up doing this weekly. All right, but most companies will start off quarterly and then go monthly and get it to the point that they can maintain it. Toolbox Talks are supposed to be short reminders of things you already know. So from voluntary use of a filtering face piece or using a dust mask, what do we already know? Can you use a dust mask when you're working?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right. What's the difference between voluntary use and mandated use of a dust mask?
Competent person directing you to wear one?
Correct. If you were directed to wear one, the reason you would wear one would be that the permissible exposure level of whatever it is you're exposed to, paint fumes, chemical reactions, silica, whatever it would be, if it's too high, they may mandate that you use a dust mask to help reduce your permissible exposure levels so you could actually work in that environment for a full day, like 8 hours, okay? That's perfectly and totally acceptable. Voluntary use is you don't like the smell or you don't like the spray back or you don't like whatever it is you're working in and you want to use one, but you're not required to use one. So there's one thing that must have taken place. We must have established that what you're doing, what you're using, is actually beneath the permissible exposure limit, okay? Because if it's not, you can't voluntarily use anything. If you voluntarily use it, do you need a medical evaluation? What do you think?
I don't think so if you're voluntary.
It has to do with respiration, so...
It's all goes back to the respiratory standard. If it's voluntarily used, you're not required to have a medical evaluation. If it's voluntarily used, do you have to have a fit test? Can you even fit test an N95 dust mask?
I don't believe so.
You can fit test one. It is not required
Well,
for
not
voluntary
required.
use. What's important with that is really for you two. Because if I came on a job site and I'm OSHA and you guys are wearing a dust mask and I can see you have facial hair, my first question is going to be, why are you wearing the dust mask? And if you tell me you're required to wear the dust mask, we have a problem. Because you can't pass a fit test with a beard. It's not possible, especially in a dust mask, because there's just not enough of a good seal that you can accomplish. If you tell me it's a voluntary use, I can't fight you for it. We've got an operator, he uses a dust mask all the time. What for, I'm not really sure. And he has a really long beard. And I don't say a word to him because it's voluntary. If he wants to wear it, that's his business. Because he's not exposed to anything that would need him to do more than that. There are some provisions in the safety standard, though, that needs to go one step further. Which, for example, like at our company, we mandate that if you're going to use dust masks, safety needs to know about it. Because I need to make sure you're not doing something where I need to drag a hygienist out there and determine that you're beneath the permissible exposure limits. A lot of times what we'll have is guys cutting concrete outside. They'll be saw cutting the sidewalk. Body position, wet methods. Do they need a dust mask? No. But we have guys who want a dust mask anyway, if nothing else for the splashback. That's perfectly fine. That's voluntary use. And yes, they can use one. And no, we don't need any historical or additional data to prove that they don't need anything else. However, we do have to determine at this point that the employee has received Appendix D of the OSHA's respiratory standard. Because if you voluntarily use a dust mask, you have to have Appendix D. It has to be furnished to you that you know what the law is that stipulates the use of a voluntary dust mask. The law is simple. It basically tells you what I just told you. It tells you what you can use, when you can use it, and Appendix D is going to break down, essentially, what your rights are as an employee. You have to see this. This got to be a huge problem for us because we were giving out tons and tons of them. Like Frank Yule, our operator, he must have had 80 copies of Appendix D because he was always using a dust mask, even though he didn't need one. So we ended up laminating them and attach them to all of the trucks. So if somebody wanted a dust mask where they went to get it out of the truck, it's posted right there so they can see it. You can do it that way. It's fine. OSHA doesn't say how you do it, but it does have to be furnished every time you go to use a dust mask. So these dust masks are designed essentially to filter any of the dust and large particles from getting into your lungs. When we talk about what gets into your lungs and what hardens and what can actually cause respiratory difficulties, we're talking about different sizes, and those different sizes at 10 parts per million, if it gets into your system, it's large enough that it can cause respiratory damage. From a silica standpoint, that's what can cause the hardening of the lungs and making it more and more difficult to breathe. Silica, or dust mask, can be used to block some of that protection because it's going to keep the largest particles from entering your body, which is ultimately what we're trying to do here. Now, although dust masks are permissible for voluntary use, employees are encouraged to be clean-shaven to provide a good fit. In the event any employees want to change or they think they're going to enter an environment where they will exceed OSHA's permissible exposure limits, all bets are off. They need medical evaluations, and they need a proper fit testing with that close seal. Other than that, we can't really push that issue. Anyone have questions with that? When you think about a job that you worked on where you had to use a dust mask?
I used one this week.
Did you have to use it, or did you voluntarily use it?
Did it myself.
Okay. So the only big key there is whether or not you were furnished Appendix D, which you may not have been, so it just means you need to look.
I just use that white cloth thing that you put over the nose, yeah.
It's an N95 dust mask.
But see, and because it's each their own, because we demoed, for me, drywall dust burns my throat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I pulled
Is it
out
old drywall?
Oh God, yes.
What's the problem with old drywall?
It just, it's dirty, it's dusty, it makes a mess.
What's in there that bugs your throat?
It just,
Probably asbestos.
it's just,
Asbestos.
yeah.
Yeah, the
But
old sheetrock.
I'm one of those guys that I'll also pull out the insulation out of the wall, and that doesn't bother me. But you'll get other guys that run the
Insulation usually bothers me.
They will run for the hills, but that doesn't bother me.
Uh-huh.
But the drywall dust does, and since I demoed the drywall over at Fifth Avenue, I wore it on my own.
It's not a bad idea, because honestly, if you're going to demo that type of sheetrock, I probably would have questioned whether or not there would be an asbestos exposure, because as you demo it and cause it... Oh, you said you didn't deal with rat poop.
Fifth, there's already.
There were dead rats everywhere.
I bet you we dug out about 20 dead mice.
That's uncommon.
Do you know what the danger is with rat poop and bird poop?
Don't know, don't care. But
It's called histoplasmosis, and it's something we dealt with a lot at the zoo. All right, histoplasmosis is most commonly found like in old barns or anything that you're going to demo. And basically when you have bird shit and rat shit everywhere, it basically, as it begins to decompose, it lets off this gas, and that gas creates histoplasmosis, which can make it really difficult to breathe. The best thing you can do to actually protect yourself against it, use an N95 dust mask voluntarily. You don't have to use it or whatever, and do it wet. Spray it down. If it doesn't become friable, it makes it much, much more difficult for it actually to enter your lungs, and it's safer to remove. There is nothing from an OSHA standpoint or EPA standpoint that makes it safer or not safer to remove. They used to have old solvents that they said you could spray on it. That's nothing. It was just like snake oil. I mean, it was nothing that would actually prevent you. The best thing, if you call the EPA now, they'll tell you spray it down with water, cut it out and remove it, bag it up, and dispose of it as regular waste.
It was a mandatory at the upholstery shop I worked at when we did if an old car came in, before we even looked at it, we wore dust masks. And same with the flood cars.
Concern over lead?
Yeah, and then same thing with lead cars.
Mm-hmm.
Or floods. Flood cars, we always wore respirators for those, just in case of black mold.
Okay.
It probably did nothing, but it made
Black
us all
mold
feel
doesn't
better.
exist. It's a marketing term.
Or
Mold
whatever mold
exists.
that was.
Well, no, they always say black mold. That's the media loves to call it black mold.
Oh.
Black mold sells. Black mold's scary.
Then what's it actually called? Just
Just mold. Mold is mold is
White
mold.
mold.
I mean,
White mold quite isn't.